Around 3200 years ago, the Mediterranean world was home of many mighty and advanced civilizations, like the Egypts, the Hittites, the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, and many more. However, within 30 years, most of these kingdoms disappeared. Mighty palaces like the one of Minos were abandoned, just like the cities of Hattusa and Mycenae. Only Egypt survived, but it was only a shadow of its former glory. For the next 450 years, humanity neglected culture and science for survival. For this reason, we know nearly nothing about the time span from 1170 to 750 before Christ. What caused this collapse of civilization? Historical records name the preparator, the Sea People. Who were they? Why did they attack the Mediterranean world? Let me answer you that question. During the Bronze Age, humanity, especially in the Mediterranean region, prospered. Advanced forms of government allowed the formation of mighty empires. This also encouraged people to live in huge cities. Cities allowed humans to become artists and architects. Wealthy rulers used their money to construct incredible buildings like the Palace of Minos on Crete or the pyramids in Egypt. There's a lot of stunning architecture and art left behind from this time. All this prosper and wealth was based on one metal, bronze. Bronze could be found on Cyprus, Anatolia, or the mountains of Afghanistan. Every nation needed bronze, so they developed a strong trade connection to have access to it. For example, an Egyptian ship loaded with Persian bronze would deliver its payload to Crete in exchange for sandals. This is not a joke. There's one record of a Persian king who was angry that his highly anticipated Greek sandals would not fit him. I think it would be fair to call the world of the late Bronze Age globalized. But everything changed with the arrival of the Sea People. The Hittites were their first victims. Weakened by inner revolts, they were unable to protect their shorelines against the endless raids of the Sea People. Most important, they lost their colonies on Cyprus, one of the biggest sources of bronze. The collapse of the Hittites caused a massive imbalance of power in the region. Neither the Egyptians or the Greeks were able to fill this gap. The next target of the Sea People was Ugarit, one of the most important trade points in the Mediterranean world. For a long time, Ugarit separated the Egyptians and the Hittites and prevented bigger conflict between the two ancient superpowers. Egypt itself is one of the biggest sources of records from the Sea People attacks. Their pharaoh, Ramses III, managed to defend his kingdom against the Sea People. He described the Sea People as wild warriors that wore helmets with horns and feathers on them. They were accompanied by their families and cattle and traveled with boats. The Sea People were also mentioned in the Bible. For example, Goliath from David and Goliath was a warrior of the Sea People. However, this is where the record ends. We only know that the rest of the Mediterranean world collapsed. Minoan and Mycenaean cities were destroyed and pillaged. The Hittites disappeared from the world stage and were only rediscovered at the end of the 19th century. The Egyptian empire was left weakened and it would never return to its former glory. Most big cities, the homes of art and culture, were abandoned and people preferred to settle in higher places that were much easier to defend. So who were the Sea People? Where do they came from? Why did they attack the Mediterranean world? Eberhard Zanger, a German archaeologist, has an interesting theory regarding the Sea People. They were the Luvians. The Luvians were a group of people that lived in southern Anatolia. They had their own language and scripture that was very similar to the one of the Hittites. For this reason, the Luvians were unknown for a long time. If archaeologists found leftovers of the Luvians, they thought it was from the Hittites. The Luvians were ruled by the Hittites for a long time, but bad harvests caused them to revolt against their former ruler. Egypt and Greek cities knew about the threat of the Luvian attacks and tried to support the Hittites with troops and money. One theory says that the famous Battle of Troy was an intervention by Mycenaean troops to stop Luvian aggression. The Battle of Troy, or better the destruction of Troy, fits into the time frame of the Sea People storm. The Luvians on the other side allied themselves to the countless tribes that suffered under the rule of the Bronze Age empires, and soon the conflict affected the whole Mediterranean world. This conflict caused the trade to freeze nearly completely, especially with bronze. Soon, the basement of Bronze Age society broke away, and humans were left with no other option than a desperate war for survival. This gets confirmed by the records of Ramses III. He states that the attack of the Luvians were not a military operation, but more a migration wave. So, were the Luvians successful? Short answer, no. Even if the Luvians were able to break the monopoly of power in the Mediterranean, they also vanished in the war. I think that this part of history is very interesting because it has so many similarities to our time. You had a highly globalized world with multiple big players. In the Bronze Age, it were the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, but now it's Russia, China, the EU and the US. Let us work together to prevent another dark age for humanity. Hello and welcome to Unknown Chapters. My name is Ben and I'm a big fan of history. But I'm also tired of hearing the same stories again and again. In this series we will talk about historical aspects that don't get featured a lot. My goal is that you learn something new in every episode. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Bye!